Hello, Thielbogen here. To my fellow workers in the vineyard, worldwide, greetings. This is part 3 of a talk entitled Open Message to the Non-Feminist Women of the World. In part 2, I began to discuss the role women ought to play in the non-feminist revolution. I will now continue in that vein. I have suggested that only a tiny percentage of women will become active in counter-feminist agitation, but that the influence of such agitators can be out of proportion to their numbers, and that many additional women can be pulled in as passive supporters and sympathizers if approached in the manner described. I would also like to suggest that when the time is ripe for an idea or an innovation, the spread of it can occur in unexpected ways that look like magic, and such a venture, to be set in motion, wants only a venturesome spirit in its application. Such being said, I turn now to the question of active practice and the organization of it. I would like to sketch, lightly and from a distance, the outward structure of women's participation in the business which lies ahead. The structure of our revolution must reflect, in embryonic form, the natural order of life that will rise to the surface as feminism sinks to its demise. We are not yet living in a post-feminist world, but we ought to plan for it, and put up a few survey markers in advance of it. The natural order of life is marked by two distinct forms of activity that we shall call men's business and women's business. And to each of these zones is mapped a fundamentally exclusionary domain of social territory, respectively male space and female space. Over the years, feminism has worked to integrate men and women forcibly into each other's business, except when women don't want this. Feminism has also worked to destroy male space as far as possible, while leaving women ample opportunity to be alone with other women if they so desire. Feminism's destruction of so-called patriarchy is centered upon the colonization of male space. Patriarchy is simply a code word for male power of any kind. And it is a well-established principle that if you want to disempower a targeted group of people, you must reduce as far as you are able the amount of time this group spends together with no outsiders present. And that is precisely what has been done to men as a group. They have been scattered and fragmented. Male institutions have been rendered anemic, and in consequence, feminism has grown powerful by filling the resulting vacuum with cultural innovations. And so the principal and most efficient way to break feminism's back is to reconstitute male space by any and all means, which includes male bonding, male friendship, and shared male activity in the absence of women. Any action to restore the sanctity of men's time with other men will be revolutionary and counter-feminist. And for that reason, the reconstitution of male space must be enshrined at the heart of the non-feminist revolution. Yes, the reconstitution of male space must be enshrined at the heart of the non-feminist revolution. Etch that upon your memory. This will sow seeds for the new post-feminist social order that will gradually emerge from the predictable turmoil which lies ahead. Men, therefore, must walk their own road on their own terms as men among men. Men must work out their own destiny as men among men. Men must reclaim their spiritual center of gravity as men among men. Women simply do not enter the picture here, or at any rate not the heart of the picture. The men's movement is narrowly about men and about their rights, while the broader non-feminist revolution is about all of us and about feminism's wrongs. so the place for women is in the broader non-feminist revolution. You might say that women are on their own in this. They are running their own show. They are their own boss. They are not the women's auxiliary of the men's movement, unless they insist on defining themselves that way. But we aren't responsible for that. They don't take marching orders from men, and it ought to gladden the heart of any feminist that empowered women will be mauling feminism on their own initiative. So, within the non-feminist revolution, men and women have their respective businesses and their respective spaces. That is how it should be in life as well. It is a vision which our revolution can grow into like a pair of boots. But all of that is to dream of the future. A worthy occupation, to be sure, yet the present likewise deserves our attention, especially nowadays while it is indeed present. Therefore, we need next to outline the exact apportionment of tasks which ought to fall to men and women respectively, in order that the non-feminist revolution will move forward efficaciously. In our movement, men and women both will spend time talking to people in order to sway them and eventually recruit them. But there is a logic to this procedure, a method to it, a template you might call it. And into this template, both men's business and women's business must be appropriately slotted. I will discuss the role of women, but toss in some occasional words about the role of men as well in order to balance the picture. Bear in mind that each sex will communicate with especial proficiency to itself as itself. Accordingly, women who agitate against feminism will make the best use of their time, energy, and natural talents if they give special thought to the uncommitted women among their auditors. Being women themselves, they can talk to other women in a way that men cannot, by which I mean that they can talk to women as women. They are from the hood. They speak the language. They can navigate in female spaces, broach topics, introduce ideas, and initiate dialogues with women in a way that no man can hope to do. But women can speak to women as women, not just in a charming or persuasive way, but if necessary in a harsh way, voicing anger with them, chastising them, taking them to task. Simply put, women can shame women as women, and again, they can do this in a way that men cannot. Whether they are berating women at large for any kind of reprobate behavior, or speaking daggers to feminist women in particular, they know the psychology of their listeners in a way that only an insider can know it. Furthermore, women can say things to women which for purely political reasons men would find it imprudent to say, and which, for the very reason that a woman says it, a feminist could not so easily dismiss or argue against. Men, in the meantime, should work to reach men as men, by appealing to masculine experience and masculine sensibility. Women can witness to men as women, of course, and do so to quite good effect by offering the inside female perspective on feminism, or by making clear to men that since many women themselves think poorly of feminism, men needn't feel pressured to support it. Men, I am very sure, would be the least effective at talking women out of feminism in one-on-one encounters. Best to leave such work to women themselves. Women, as women, can shame not only other women, but men especially. Indeed, the power of women to shame men is legendary, although some men are more susceptible to this and others not so much. But this is so important it ought to be treated at length. The projected task, as I see it, is very simply that women would shame men for supporting feminism. Various lines of appeal are possible here, depending on the cultural demographic being subjected to this operation. Men from both the right and the left of the political spectrum will be found supporting feminism, the former indirectly and naively, the latter aggressively and openly. We shall loosely refer to the latter as the pro-feminist men's movement. We focus on them in particular because of all male groups supporting feminism, they are by a considerable margin the most mischievous and septic. It grieves and sickens me above all other things to see young men and boys at the vulnerable stage of identity formation falling into the hands of the pro-feminist men's movement. The latter have developed a widespread mentoring and indoctrinating industry, and they are always looking for opportunities to socially engineer the younger generation. It is common to think of these people as traitors, but I suppose that is a question of semantics. For to be a traitor is to betray, specifically to betray a loyalty once pledged. Otherwise, one is not properly a traitor, but purely and simply an enemy. However, I cannot bother myself to untangle that skein, which at all events would profit me nothing. Enemy, traitor, it's all the same in the end. I call them simply collaborationists, a usage I would recommend to all. The members of the pro-feminist men's movement have aligned themselves with feminism for complex reasons. But rest assured, they would not be doing this if it held no prospect of reward. Be that psychic, sexual, political, tangible, or intangible, these males are gaining something from the bargain they have concluded. Now, since I lack the time or patience to explicate the nuances, I'll wrap it up simply. These fellows are positioning themselves as the male ruling class in a projected feminist social order. For all of their angelic rhetoric, what they truly seek is power. Their principal conflict is with certain men of a different subcultural or socioeconomic base than themselves, and they wish to become the top dogs. To that end, they have concluded an arrangement with, loosely speaking, women, but more accurately, feminist women. There is simply no way that the feminist ensemble of anti-male innovations could have been set in place without, paradoxical as it sounds, male support. It was so in the beginning, and it needs to be ongoing, or else the innovations would swiftly be eroded and nullified by the sheer force of male non-cooperation and male solidarity. The feminist anti-male power structure could not continue existing without a class of male iskariots permanently installed within that structure. And these men, as said, make a proper target for the shaming action of non-feminist female agitators. They are, as they have abundantly demonstrated, vulnerable to female opinion, especially in their proclivity to be so open-minded they can't take their own side, a trait which may be played upon. Accordingly, you may inform them that they are deaf to the diversity of women's voices, and therefore insensitive to women's real needs. You may aver that their concern for women is essentially phony and rooted in their own psychopathology. You may convey to them that their evident want of self-respect makes them unworthy of your own respect, while at the same time making plain your personal feelings about feminism. You may impress upon them that they are not helping women by supporting feminism, that you are not pleased by the position they have taken, and that you will not support them socially or politically. Finally, you may submit to them that they are betraying other men, and that they ought to feel ashamed. You may communicate all of this either by direct conversation or by injecting your message into every form of media you can access, so that the word will reach the targeted group by ambient circulation. So much, then, for the role of women in the game of non-feminist agitation. I've only begun to sketch the possibilities, but I wanted to offer a few suggestions as pointers for continued study. At any rate, this has been a long talk, and I think it is past time to wrap it up. The non-feminist revolution is a pattern, a paradigm, a path-breaking pilot project for a range of innovationary initiatives. A life-sustaining balance of energy between male and female may, in the traffic of such endeavors, be brought about through spontaneous forces of organic development. And if there is a viable social contract to be developed in the course of all this, it will emerge from the many reforms that will be set in motion, and upon the foundation of trust established while making this happen. In the end, I foresee the day when a dynamic coalition of socio-political forces involving both men and women will pin the beast of feminism in a kind of permanent wrestler's hold. Very well. I have offered a number of policy suggestions in the present speech, and sheer luck combined with my feeble powers of persuasion might prevail on one or two people to swing these into practice. Accordingly, if you've a mind to such work, go forth and share these words with other women, and men too. More importantly, share your own words, but choose them wisely and make them count. All the best to you. Fiedelbogen, out. Only a tiny percentage of women will become active in counter-feminist agitation, but that the influence of such agitators can be out of proportion to their numbers, and that many additional women can be pulled in as passive supporters and sympathizers if approached in the manner described. I would also like to suggest that when the time is ripe for an idea or an innovation, the spread of it can occur in unexpected ways, and to each of these zones is mapped a fundamentally exclusionary domain of social territory, respectively male space and female space. Over the years, feminism has worked to integrate men and women forcibly into each other's business, except when women don't want this. Feminism has also worked to destroy male space as far as... Hello, Fiedelbogen here. To my fellow workers in the vineyard, worldwide, greetings. This is part 3 of a talk entitled Open Message to the Non-Feminist Women of the World. In part 2, I began to discuss the role women ought to play in the non-feminist revolution. I will now continue in that vein. I have suggested that ways that look like magic, and such a venture to be set in motion wants only a venturesome spirit in its application. Such being said, I turn now to the question of active practice and the organization of it. I would like to sketch, lightly and from a distance, the outward structure of women's participation in the business which lies ahead. The structure of our revolution must reflect, in embryonic form, the natural order of life that will rise to the surface as feminism sinks to its demise. We are not yet living in a post-feminist world, but we ought to plan for it, and put up a few survey markers in advance of it. The natural order of life is marked by two distinct forms of activity that we shall call men's business and women's business.